Marketplace e-commerce platforms commonly have a quoting workflow. Now, depending on your marketplace, you may or may not have quotes yet. But one thing that we would encourage you to think about is, where is your marketplace going to be in the next 3 to 5 years? Ultimately, quotes have a very specific and relatively unique workflow where there's a lot of interaction between the buyer and the seller. Now, this can apply even in the scenario where we're just getting quotes for the shipping, or maybe one aspect of the fulfillment requires quotes and detailed processes that we need to execute on in order to ensure that the fulfillment is completed successfully. So ultimately, the principles of the quoting process are going to apply. And these are highly focused on notifications, having a very clear set of expectations for what will happen next in the process, and being able to manage those expectations on both sides, both the buyer and the seller. And we also want to make sure that throughout this process, we have safeguards in place, KPIs and reporting, to be able to inject a manual process or sort of a automated escalatory process to make sure that both parties are engaging, and there are fail safes if for whatever reason one of the parties falls out of the process of engaging to complete the fulfillment. What happens if the seller never fulfills the item? They stop using the marketplace. What's going to happen to the person who received a quote and got all the way through the process, submitted their payment even potentially, and haven't received a fulfillment? How are we going to handle that scenario? How are we going to handle the scenario where they really feel confident that they're actually going to get a fulfillment on something? The seller tells them something, they count on it, they stop looking for other bids elsewhere, and now all of a sudden the seller isn't able to come through. How do you handle the buyer's satisfaction in these type of scenarios? Similarly, you might have a seller who's getting a lot of quotes but never gets anyone who actually purchases, and so they may get burnt out on using your site, using your marketplace, if the buyers aren't qualified. And these are just a few examples. The quoting process itself is absolutely critical for a lot of different aspects too, like shipping, for example. You could have someone complete an entire order, go through the process, and realize that the shipping costs more than the actual item they're purchasing. And that's maybe not something that is a showstopper, but a lot of times it will be. And so what are their options for carriers and for fulfillment that doesn't break the bank? And how do we present this upfront so that it's very clear to, again, both the buyer and the seller? So these are the topics that we really want to be able to address with the quoting workflows. And in general, one of the best ways to do that, and one of the kind of key areas of failure that typically occurs, is going to be within the seller side of things. A lot of times the seller gets really busy, they get overwhelmed, and they just don't put the time in because they're not seeing an immediate payoff from going through a quoting process. So typically the best way to handle this is to make it really easy for them to complete the process. So as you can see here, we have a quoting dashboard, a quoting management dashboard. And ultimately, the big takeaway that we want to encourage you to get from this dashboard is, regardless of how you exactly want to optimize and set up your quoting management system, it really ought to have the ability for the seller to receive notifications timely based on key points in the workflow. And so here you can see they have all quotes, quotes that need to be confirmed, that have been read, responded to. Now they're actually in an order processing state, and then historical. Offering more detailed filtering options and allowing them to filter based on keyword, and going ahead and drilling into the quote as well, so that they can actually manage the details of the quote here too. Now, ultimately, the big thing with the seller side of things is for them to be able to get into the weeds and then even have a chat and an interaction with the buyer so that they can effectively communicate in as near a real time as is necessary, and accumulate the different external resources like a carrier cost estimate, possibly insurance cost estimates. They might have to deal with special conditions where they're having to actually set up timing or information around LTL shipments. Really, the list goes on. I mean, it depends on what you're selling within your marketplace. It could be quite simple, but there still needs to be a quoting process for whatever reason. And ultimately, we want to make the process as streamlined as possible. So this dashboard is really sort of an entryway into that streamlined process. And we're also going to take a look at the quote detail in a future video. With that said, if you have any questions about quotes in general and how you can leverage these for an aspect or for the entire quoting process for your marketplace, or for shipments or other aspects of the order itself that may need a specific custom quote, we encourage you to reach out to our team. We have a complimentary discovery process that is no sales. You're welcome to engage so we can get you some recommendations of best practices. Ultimately, if you like this video, we would love it if you would like and subscribe, and we appreciate you watching till the end. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.